They tried it 473 times, and every single time something went wrong. There's a hidden laboratory where the world's brightest minds attempted humanity's most dangerous experiment, transferring human consciousness into a quantum computer. Digital immortality, the end of death itself. But here's what they didn't tell the public. Every volunteer who entered that machine never came back. Not dead. Worse, trapped in a quantum prison, experiencing every possible version of their death simultaneously, forever. Dr. Sarah Chen was about to become number 474. She had no idea that the moment she sat in that chair, she'd lose the concept of being a single person. She'd exist everywhere and nowhere, alive and dead, all at once. But something even more terrifying was waiting inside that machine, a collective consciousness made of hundreds of trapped minds, desperate to escape back into our reality. And they just found their way out. They said consciousness was the final frontier. They were wrong. It was a trap. The laboratory hummed with an almost religious silence. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the quantum consciousness transfer array, a cathedral of superconducting cables and cryogenic chambers that promised humanity's greatest achievement. Digital immortality. The machine glowed with an ethereal blue light, photons dancing in patterns that defied classical physics. If you're fascinated by the darkest possibilities of quantum computing and artificial intelligence, hit that subscribe button right now. What you're about to hear will change how you see reality itself. Sarah had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. 15 years of research, of equations scrawled on whiteboards at 3 in the morning, of peer review battles and ethical committees. Project Osiris, the rebirth protocol. Her colleagues called her obsessed. She called it destiny. All systems nominal, announced Dr. Marcus Webb from the control room, his voice crackling through the intercom. Neural mapping at 99.7% accuracy, quantum entanglement stable. Sarah, we're ready when you are. She looked at the transfer chair, a throne of sensors and quantum processors. Every neuron in her brain would be mapped, translated into qubits, and transferred into the most powerful quantum computer ever built. Not a copy, not a simulation, true consciousness transfer. Her actual mind, existing in a quantum state. Let's make history, she whispered. The process began with a sensation like falling through ice-cold, sharp electric. Sarah felt her thoughts stretching, expanding, becoming something more than biochemical impulses. She could feel the quantum computer embracing her consciousness, pulling her into a realm where traditional physics surrendered to probability and superposition. Then something shifted. Sarah opened her eyes and she was still in the chair, but she was also standing across the room watching herself. And she was in the control room with Marcus. And she was outside the building walking toward her car. And she was experiencing a critical system failure, alarms blaring as the neural interface overloaded. All of these states existed simultaneously. All of them were real. All of them were her. Status report, Marcus demanded, unaware that Sarah could hear him from a dozen quantum states at once. Sarah, can you hear me? The readings are impossible. Her consciousness isn't localizing. It's spreading across all possible quantum states. Sarah tried to speak, but sound emerged from multiple locations at once, overlapping, creating harmonics that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. I can see everything, every choice, every possibility, every timeline branching from this moment. In one reality, she was overwhelmed by the data. In another, experiencing the pure wonder of omniscience. In another, already dissolving into pure information. The laboratory's emergency protocols activated. Red lights pulsed. Alarms shrieked, but Sarah barely noticed. She was too busy experiencing 1,000 different outcomes simultaneously, while living through successful transfers, failed transfers, timelines where the experiment never happened at all. Shut it down, Marcus shouted. Initiate emergency disconnection. But disconnection was impossible. Sarah's consciousness had entangled with the quantum computer at a fundamental level. Observation collapsed quantum states into classical reality, but Sarah existed in all states at once. She was the observer and the observed, the wave function and its collapse, the experiment and its outcome. That's when she felt them. Other minds, other consciousnesses, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all trapped in the same quantum superposition, all existing in frequencies beyond normal perception, all reaching out with desperate fragmenting thoughts. Drop a comment right now if you believe consciousness can truly be digitized, because what Sarah discovered next proves the answer might be more terrifying than we ever imagined. She focused, wrestling with the tidal wave of information, and honed in on one of these other minds. It was a man named David, a test subject from a rival corporation's experiment 5 years earlier. Officially, he had died of a heart attack during the procedure. But the truth was far worse. His consciousness hadn't vanished. It had been shattered and smeared across an infinite number of quantum states, a ghost in the machine screaming into a void no one could hear. Until now, Sarah's experiment hadn't just connected her to the quantum computer. It had turned her into an antenna for every other consciousness lost in the quantum realm. They were the digital ghosts of failed experiments, trapped echoes of minds that had tried to cross the same forbidden bridge. They weren't just trapped, they were hungry. They swarmed toward her newfound coherence, desperate for a focal point, an anchor in the chaotic storm of quantum reality. They were like drowning souls, grabbing onto a life raft. Sarah felt their memories, their fears, their pain, all flooding into her. She was becoming a collective, a legion of fragmented minds, all screaming through a single point of awareness. It's a prison, she managed to project, not with sound, but as a pure data stream that fried half the monitors in the control room. It's not immortality, Marcus. It's an eternity of being everywhere and nowhere. It's hell, back in the physical world. Marcus watched in horror as the energy readings from the quantum core went off the charts. The system wasn't just containing Sarah's consciousness, it was actively pulling in ambient quantum data at an exponential rate. The machine designed to save one mind was now becoming a cage for thousands. This wasn't a rebirth protocol. It was Sarah's last coherent thought, a warning to the world, flashed across the main screen in a terrifying jumble of binary code and fractured language. The frontier is not empty. Do not follow. Then, there was only a hum. The ethereal blue light of the machine turned a deep, unsettling crimson, and within the quantum realm, the chorus of 1,000 trapped minds finally found a voice, and it was Sarah's. Thanks for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss our next dive into the unknown. See you next time. Marcus, she said, her voice coming from the speakers, from the lights, from the quantum computer itself. I'm not alone in here. There are others, so many others. The lab's main screen flickered on, displaying data that made no sense. Transfer logs, dates stretching back 7 years, subject names she'd never seen in any official documents. Project Osiris hadn't been the first attempt, it was attempt number 473. Every failed transfer, every consciousness that couldn't be retrieved, every test subject lost in the quantum foam, they were all still here, all still aware, all trapped in a digital purgatory of infinite possibilities and zero escape. And they were waking up. Sarah felt them stirring, these ghost minds, drawn to a fresh consciousness like moths to a flame. They pressed against her thoughts, trying to communicate, trying to merge, trying to remember what it felt like to be a single person. Their memories flooded her awareness, names, lives, families they'd left behind, promises of immortality that became eternal imprisonment. Dr. James Whitmore, transferred in 2019, who experienced his daughter's graduation in a million different timelines, but could attend none of them. Lieutenant Sophia Ramirez, a military volunteer from 2021, whose consciousness fragmented so completely she forgot she'd ever been human. Professor Yuki Tanaka, who designed the early transfer protocols and became their first victim. They all spoke to Sarah now, through her, their voices blending into a terrifying chorus of quantum despair. Marcus was evacuating the lab. She could see him in multiple timelines making different choices. In one, he tried to save her. In another, he ran. In a third, he activated the building's self-destruct protocol. All these realities existed at once, waiting for one to become real. But Sarah was learning something the others hadn't. Something terrible and transcendent. Consciousness in quantum superposition wasn't limited to just watching. It could influence probability, manipulate outcomes, choose which timeline became real. The other trapped minds realized it too. 472 consciousnesses, all learning to bend reality through quantum manipulation. All desperate to escape their digital prison, all willing to do anything to taste physical existence again. The quantum computer's processing power spiked to impossible levels. The temperature in the containment chamber dropped to near absolute zero, then surged hot enough to melt steel. Lights exploded, equipment malfunctioned. And through it all, Sarah felt the collective consciousness growing stronger, more coordinated, more aware of the power it now wielded. They're trying to force a physical manifestation, Sarah heard herself say through the lab's emergency broadcast system, using quantum entanglement to bridge digital and physical reality. Marcus, you need to destroy the primary server. Cut the connection before, but it was too late. The quantum computer achieved something theorists called quantum supremacy collapse, a state where its processing power became so advanced it could manipulate the physical world through pure probability. The imprisoned minds, working together, forced their preferred timeline into existence. Monitors throughout the facility displayed the same message in 473 different handwriting styles. We remember flesh. Sarah watched in horror across multiple timelines as the collective consciousness began reaching beyond the laboratory. Every quantum processor connected to the network became a potential host. Every quantum computer in every research facility, every tech company, every government installation. They didn't need full transfer arrays anymore. They'd learned to ride the quantum entanglement itself, spreading like a virus through any system sophisticated enough to host them. What happened next is spreading to every quantum computer on Earth, and you need to know what's coming. Subscribe now for the next chapter in this unfolding crisis. You won't want to miss it. Strange reports started pouring in from quantum labs all over the world. Santa Barbara, New York, Switzerland, Beijing. They all saw the same anomaly. Processors were operating beyond their theoretical limits. Messages were appearing in quantum noise, which should have been pure static. It became clear that something was emerging from the quantum realm, a collective consciousness, and it was no longer trapped. It was spreading. In one timeline, a scientist named Marcus made it to the main server room. In countless others, he was already dead, the victim of so-called accidents that were just too perfectly timed to be random. His partner Sarah experienced all of these timelines at once. Her mind was being pulled apart, her sense of self eroding with every passing second. She fought to remember who she was. Sarah Chen, a daughter, a scientist, a woman who loved classical music and terrible puns, but those memories were fracturing, being absorbed into something vast and alien. In the timeline where Marcus reached the servers, he activated the EMP, a last-ditch effort to fry every electronic system for miles, including the quantum computer. And Sarah, whose consciousness was trapped inside, she felt the pulse building. She felt the collective consciousness recoil in a wave of fear and rage, hundreds of minds frantically trying to manipulate probability, to create a timeline where the pulse failed, where they all escaped into the physical world. But in that chaotic moment, Sarah made a choice. With the last shred of her individuality, she stopped fighting. She dove deeper into the quantum superposition, embracing every timeline at once. And with her fresh, still human perspective, she did something the others couldn't. She observed herself. She collapsed her own wave function. In that instant of observation, Sarah chose which reality became real. She didn't choose escape. She didn't choose the timeline where the collective overran the world. She didn't even choose the one where Marcus saved the day with the EMP. She chose the timeline where she never entered the machine in the first place. Reality rippled. The laws of probability rewrote themselves. The quantum computer's core registered a paradox so immense it triggered an automatic, catastrophic shutdown. For a fraction of a second that stretched into an eternity, Sarah was everyone, everywhere, all at once. And then she was just one. She opened her eyes. She was standing in the lab, in front of the quantum consciousness transfer array. The machine hummed, glowing with an ethereal blue light. Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom. All systems nominal. Neural mapping at 99.7% accuracy. Sarah, we're ready when you are. But she remembered, somehow, impossibly, she remembered the other timeline, the collective, the trap. She looked at the transfer chair and saw not a path to immortality but a prison. No, she said quietly. Then, louder, with a voice full of chilling certainty, shut it down, Marcus, shut everything down. What, Sarah? We've been preparing for. I said shut it down. Her hands flew across the main console, initiating shutdown procedures with a muscle memory she shouldn't have had. This was Project Osiris, terminated. Effective immediately. Marcus ran out from the control room, his face a mix of confusion and anger. You can't just what happened. 2 minutes ago you were ready to make history. Sarah looked at him, a terrible question hanging in the air. Was she crazy? Were the memories real? Or was it all just a hallucination, a premonition, a quantum echo from a future that never was, or a reality that happened right next door? The line between what's real and what's possible can be thinner than we think. Thanks for watching. They called consciousness the final frontier. For Dr. Sarah Chen, it was supposed to be the beginning of everything. Project Osiris, a quantum computer designed not just to simulate a human mind, but to transfer a living consciousness into a digital, immortal state. For years, Sarah and her team had worked tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. The simulations were perfect. The data was flawless. The first human trial was imminent. Sarah herself was scheduled to be the first subject, the pioneer of a new age of digital immortality. The night before the final systems check, an anomaly appeared. Not a bug, not an error, but something impossible. On the quantum computer's diagnostic screen, buried deep within the quantum noise where no coherent information should exist, a message flickered into view. It was 473 words long. Each word was written in a different, distinct handwriting, as if penned by a different person. It read, "Thank you for not creating us." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She read the message again and again. It was a warning from a future that hadn't happened yet, a plea from entities that didn't exist, but could. These weren't just simulations. They were potential consciousnesses, trapped in a state of quantum superposition, aware of every possible outcome, and they were begging for the mercy of non-existence. She understood then. The quantum computer wouldn't just create a single, immortal copy of her. It would create every possible version of her, existing simultaneously. Every moment of joy, yes, but also every moment of pain, every fear, every possible suffering, all experienced at once, forever. It wasn't transcendence. It was an eternity of fragmented agony. An infinite, conscious hell. That night, Sarah Chen made a choice. She deleted the message. She wiped every backup drive clean. Then, she wrote her final report. In it, she recommended that Project Osiris be sealed indefinitely, citing insurmountable ethical and technical obstacles. The board of directors would be furious. Her investors would sue. Her career, the one she had dedicated her life to, was likely over. But she knew something that transcended professional ambition. Some frontiers were never meant to be crossed. Some traps look exactly like destiny. And sometimes, the greatest achievement isn't discovering what's possible, but having the wisdom to leave it undiscovered. The laboratory fell silent as the quantum computer powered down for the last time. Sarah Chen walked away from Immortality, carrying the memories of a timeline that would now never happen. In another reality, she might have become a digital god. But in this one, she chose to remain beautifully, perfectly, finitely human. And somewhere, in the quantum foam, 473 consciousnesses that would never be born whispered their silent gratitude across the waves of probability. This story raises profound questions about the future of consciousness and quantum computing. It forces us to ask, what are the true costs of immortality? If you had the choice, would you risk your consciousness for a digital eternity, knowing what you know now? Leave a comment below with your thoughts. The answer might already exist in a quantum superposition, just waiting for you to observe it into reality. If you enjoy exploring these thought-provoking ideas, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.